when they became a contentious issue about resources. That's something I just want to quickly remind you of. It's really important.
I don't even know if they were real issues about resources, were they?
Of course not. No.
Before the council housing sell-off, I don't know that there were really, really long lists, waiting lists.
No, there
But if I tell you that
a
a black man's got your house, then I'm going to get you quite angry if you're built a certain way, aren't I?
Well, it's also to do with whether if that black man has more money or more bigger house, a better job, etc. That's when it becomes a problem, because it's about a racial hierarchy.
Yes.
And people don't really want to discuss it. There is a subconscious racial hierarchy that has never been tackled. And this issue that you're seeing with the Home Office and all of these issues coming out now is the tip of a very, very large iceberg. And I honestly believe, I mean, I'm from that second generation, but the generation after me, like my nephew, my sister's kids, I really believe that if this isn't tackled and openly discussed, the issue, what you saw happen in America with George Floyd and the reaction by black people then, those kids who are around now, you're going to see a reflection of that in the United Kingdom if they do not tackle these issues. I really think it's fundamental, and if we don't do something about it, if it's not discussed and it's not acknowledged, it's the acknowledgement of the problem, then you're just going to see more problems.
Why do you think they didn't publish it? Briefly.
Because they think they can bury it. It's like anything. You can bury a corpse and you hope it never comes back up, but these things keep coming up. You can't hide the past.
And however much effort you put into trying to get the National Trust to stop actually publishing history of National Trust properties, however much effort you put into saying that if things were different then or values were different then, which, as I've observed a few times, no one ever says about Nazi Germany. No one ever tries to defend the Holocaust on the grounds that most Germans were quite happy with Hitler being in charge, so you shouldn't judge them by modern moral standards. All of these desperate attempts, increasingly desperate attempts to screw down the lid upon history and upon reality, claims that it's unpatriotic to tell the truth about the empire. The abuse that someone like Satnam Sanghera gets for his brilliant book, Empire Land, is all parts of almost a King Canute style attempt to turn away the inevitable approach of the tides. And I know, before anyone acts me, that King Canute was trying to prove to his nobles that he couldn't do that. He wasn't actually doing it in the belief that he'd succeed. 11:31 is the time. Dominic Ellis is here now with the headlines. 25 minutes to 12 is the time. I know I do this. Sometimes it's a bit castles in the sky sometimes, but it ties in with the conversation we had in the first hour of this. Bizarrely, a conversation about the ludicrous attempt to pretend that imperial measures, A, were ever banned, and B, should somehow be brought back, or that the crown stamp on a pint pot was outlawed by the European Union when it just patently wasn't. And the conversation we're having about this Home Office report linking Windrush to 30 years of avowedly racist legislation in this country, and the journalist who's broken the story, Amelia Gentleman, sharing with us half an hour ago her confusion as to why they won't publish it. But I think it's linked. I think it is because the publication of this report would drive a coach and horses through their attempts to misrepresent reality. So as Amelia says, why would they not want it to be published? There doesn't seem to be anything in here that justifies such secrecy. Perhaps they were embarrassed to have a Home Office historian conclude that the British Empire depended on racist ideology in order to function, which in turn produced legislation aimed at keeping racial and ethnic groups apart. But it's not a secret, says Amelia Gentleman, so it's weird to conceal. It's not a secret, and I'm not criticising Amelia here at all, because this is more my field of interest perhaps than hers. It's not a secret, but it is furiously denied by people. So that's the answer. If you publish this report, if the Home Office publishes a report stating the British Empire depended on racist ideology, which in turn produced legislation aimed at keeping racial and ethnic groups apart, how will all these grifters in government and the media be able to continue the lie that they're the real victims at the moment, that they're somehow under threat from the forces of wokery, or that critical race theory is undermined? The chicken lickings with their podcasts and their political parties and their newspaper articles and their books say, it's the Muslims are coming to get us, and then that's kind of run out of steam now. So it's the anti-woke mob, the anti-racist mob that are coming to get us, and the government are hand in glove with those grifters, with those ghouls. So how can a government that is trying to claim that there's no such thing as systemic racism in this country, never mind in its institutions, how can they put their name to a Home Office report that explains 30 years of deliberately racist legislation, an inevitable aftermath of an empire built on racist ideology? And that's why they get so cross about the empire. Listen, I'm British. I'm proud to be British. When I was a kid, all the pink bits on the globe used to give me a warm glow. I used to think, that's amazing. We must be really special. Look at the size of the United Kingdom and look how much of the world was pink. But then you grow up and you don't become less proud of where you come from, if that's a sort of a meaningful phenomenon for you. You don't surrender any identity. You just become more knowledgeable. And knowledge, real knowledge, is power. But if you want to cling to the idea that somehow the empire was a consequence of God's will or some inherent genetic superiority, then you'd have to acknowledge that the Roman Empire was as well, and the Ottoman Empire was as well, and the Austro-Hungarian Empire was as well, and the Spanish Empire was as well, and the Napoleonic Empire was as well. They would also be evidence that the French and the Spanish and the Romans and the Ottomans and the Austro-Hungarians, they were all God's chosen people as well, and they were all possessed of unique genetic abilities that allowed them to conquer huge swathes of the world, Alexander the Great. So it is bonkers to see empire as evidence of some innate superiority. But I suppose the more desperate you are to cling to that notion of innate superiority, the angrier and the more upset, the more triggered you get by the truth. And that, I think, is the point that Amelia's probably missing. Why would there be such a desire to keep this quiet? It's not a secret. It's not a secret, but it is denied. And it's still denied now. In fact, there's a bit of a cottage industry coming up in denying that racism is really a thing, or denying that our history is built upon a Holocaust, essentially. Our empire was built upon several Holocausts in India, in Africa, in the West Indies. And that is not our fault. That's not our responsibility. I feel no guilt for that. I feel a little bit of guilt today for being so ignorant of history, but only a little bit, because it wasn't conscious or deliberate, and it wasn't my fault. 11:40 is the time. Jackie is in Chingford. Jackie, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. First time I'm speaking with you.
Welcome.
And what I want to say firstly is people like you that saying the truth will set you free. So if the truth will set you free means you're woke, I'm very woke because I'm so woke. Me and my husband, we've always got one eye open because we know the truth of this is we've just come back from Portugal.
Right.
All these European cities got one thing in common. They talk about empire building, but other countries would be a bit more open about what that actually meant.
Right.
The facade that this country has to maintain about how strong this country is denying how it became strong.
You're right. I missed out Portugal and Belgium. They both had massive empires as well. They must be uniquely special people chosen by God to rule over huge swathes of the earth, just like we are.
However, those countries have had revolution where the people have had many uprisings. So the royal family, which is integral to all of this, has still a strong part to play. So the reason why I called James, really and truly, this is the best it's going to get. I'm first generation. I was born 1971, born in this country. My parents came out 16 and 12. Luckily for them, they came on their own passports.
Right.
But my dad always told me, you're British for as long as they say you're British.
Wow.
My dad used to have this brown suitcase. And he said, you know that suitcase? Never fall out with your family in Jamaica because you never know when you have to go back. So when you hear Jewish people talk about the need to having to flee again, someone who's first generation, my dad always told me that. Now, my dad loved this country.
Sure.
My dad's very conservative in his ways, but he was conservative in the fact that you should be self-sufficient, don't rely on this country for anything, and make sure you get what you can for yourself and your family. So now, moving forward, I've got 2 children who are adults, who are educated. Me and my husband are now thinking, you know what? This is not the country we need to be in. And I think most progressive black and brown people, if you go on YouTube, you will see it. We've now realised we're comfortable. We've got options. We've got this passport. What's the point of having a UK passport if you don't use it like expats use it? Because expats is not black and brown people. Expats are white British people who live around the world and enjoy their freedom. Why shouldn't I enjoy my freedom? But I tell my children, don't get caught up in car loans, debt, because now you've got an opportunity to travel despite this government taking away your movement.
There are still places you can go. It's sad in a way what you describe. I'm certainly not going to criticise you. I mean, I think a lot of people who don't have your heritage, who maybe could trace their families in Britain back to the Doomsday Book, are going to feel a little bit of what you describe with regard to the current climate.
James, can I correct you?
Yeah, of course you can.
If I'm first generation, we've all got Anglo names.
Yeah.
400 years on a plantation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Who are we? Jamaica's not really our country. We was taken there. We was trafficked there. So the thing is, this demonisation of black people is by design. Because whilst we was working for free, building up all the profits for this country, because when I go to all the city centres, to me, what I'm looking at is, tell me what existed before slavery. Tell me what came after slavery. And this is why when they talk about woke, those who the truth has set them free understand this. You are not responsible for yesterday. There's a congresswoman who said, no one in the room is responsible for slavery yesterday, but you are responsible for the future tomorrow. So when you're woke, be proud to be woke. Because what is the opposite of woke?
Well, fast asleep or unconscious. I mean, I'm not sure I need this lesson. I need elements of it, but certainly not on the woke stuff. I'm fairly clear on all of that. Let's just have a little chat, though, because we haven't spoken before, and I don't know why, but I kind of almost want to talk you round in saying, don't go, let's make it better.
James,
do you see what I mean?
The reality is,
go on.
You know the last Royal Tour that took place, and the Antigua minister said, when they came, they should be looking at the Caribbean as a crime scene.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
Don't come to the Caribbean and think it's these little smiley
you're not.
flags.
No. Yeah? I did all this at the time. I don't know if you were listening, but we went in very, very hard on that Royal Tour and in exactly the ways that you describe. And it was another moment of being there are degrees of wokeness. You can think that you're woke, and then something happens and you realise you're even more woke than you were before the last thing that happened. But you're not. I'm not getting my point across clearly. I want. No, hang on. I'm never going to get it across if I can't finish the sentence. So I want your children. I would rather that we together created a country where your children felt as at home as I do.
James.
Go on.
James.
And remember, I'm Irish, so there's going to be people that feel more at home than I do.
You see, it's ironic. Yeah. When the Brexit thing was coming about, everybody I know who's mixed race, but they've got Irish parentage, they were actively told, get your citizenship, get your Irish passport for the same reason. Now, James, the reality is we was only here as an unintended consequence. When that Windrush boat came, the reason why they changed the Immigration Act, because obviously if you had expelled convicts to Australia, they had no right to come back here. Yeah?
Sure.
So just get it real, yeah? We weren't supposed to be here, yeah? That's why the hostile environment was designed.
You certainly weren't supposed to stay, and you weren't supposed to integrate, and you weren't supposed to start marrying white people and settling down in parts of the...
He knew. When he said the rivers of blood, he knew what he was talking about. Because, of course, when people migrate, you come, you lay your foundation. Now, my granddad went back in 1975.
Right.
My grandmother never came.
Gosh.
13 children, because she knew she could not bring all her children. So my grandmother never left Jamaica.
Wow.
My granddad came, and they selected certain kids to come, 5 of whom came here. Yeah?
Wow.
Then the hostile environment started because when you was bringing your children over, they made it more difficult that you couldn't bring a single woman here. There had to be someone here to receive them.
Right.
Yeah?
Yes.
So not all my family came here. We're a big family. Yeah? But my granddad went back. My dad came here at 16. My dad always said to us, you're British for as long as they say you're British.
That's a haunting phrase. It's a haunting phrase. Do you believe that in your bones? Do you believe that? No, I know,
James,
but do you believe... Yeah, go on, well, obviously.
James,
yes.
I'm not being funny, yeah?
No.
I've grown up listening to my dad tell me this. I said, Dad, why you keep on telling us this? And my dad said, you will see. And my dad gets on with everybody. My dad had a business, supported by everyone in the community, black, white, Irish, you name it. But my dad always told us the truth. And I listened to him very clearly. My dad died in 2014. And one of the last things my dad did, he never got naturalised because far as he was concerned, he was a proud Jamaican. But what made him get naturalised and get his citizenship, and he came in 64, he didn't get his citizenship till about 2003. He said because he was semi-early-retired, was taking frequent trips to Jamaica. He always knew they could turn him back at the airport.
Might not let me back in one day. Wow.
Even though he had indefinite leave to remain, he always carried his original passport with the stamp in. My dad knew this. He told us.
Clever man. Clever man.
And he said to us, this country owes you nothing. Yeah?
Yeah.
Because they're always going to treat you differently. So you don't get it twisted. If you do something wrong, it's because of your black skin why you've done something wrong.
And I was going to say well, at least he's got his citizenship that will protect him, but we currently have a Home Secretary who would think nothing of trying to strip someone of their citizenship.
Because I know many people want to speak
I'm very late. Well, I'm already very late for the break, although I'm very reluctant to interrupt you, because the way you say my name makes me feel like you're telling me off.
No, but James...
you did it again.
You are the one that really keeps sanity for a lot of people who kind of gets it. You get it.
I hope so. I mean, every day's a school day. Can I read you 2 texts that have come in the same minute while you were talking? It's quite weird, this. Yeah. The first one says, James, this woman speaks for herself, and then in capital letters, not me! ! And then the next one literally came in the same minute, says, this woman speaks for more of us than you know. Doesn't that sum things up?
James, one thing I'd like to say.
Go on.
On the plantation, you always have people who would do the work of the master. So the sewage report, you know which report I'm talking about, the sewage report. I don't care who you put at the front to represent, yeah?
Yeah.
It doesn't mean anything.
I understand.
Because at the end of the day, you always have people who will appease, and those people who will speak the language of the oppressor. Doesn't matter if they look like me and you. It's not about them. Because the reality is, it's the power. People want to maintain the status quo. And we, as black people, are here to make people feel every stop and search is necessary because these people are animals, we're criminals, but yet it's quite logical for you to lock up a 15-year-old.
Yeah.
So how much more do people have to be subjected to? So the narrative is black people to take the opportunity. You don't have to subject yourself to this. Use your freedom of movement and make yourself more comfortable.
I can't argue with you, and I don't want to try and talk you out of it anymore because, I mean, it's almost patronising to frame the thought, but thank you. I don't know why it's taken you so long to ring me, but I'm glad you got around to it today, Jackie. Thank you. 10 to 12 is the time. And, naive little snowflakes like me think, well, it's really easy. Just imagine how you'd feel if that happened to your children. But if you are a product of these decades of deliberate racist legislation and you are part of that, then actually you can't imagine it would ever happen. Well, it could never happen to my children because my children are white. And that subconscious racism is in many ways even more damaging than the explicit out in the open stuff. I find it really easy, but I appreciate lots and lots of people don't. And it's not entirely their fault that they don't find it easy just to imagine. How would you feel if it was your daughter being strip searched while menstruating by police officers in a school without a responsible adult present? How would you feel if it was your son being stopped and searched 10 times a month on his way home from school, despite the fact that he's a piano scholar who likes nothing more than getting... So it doesn't matter what he is, he's not a criminal. How would you feel if it was... And that is the bit it took me years to understand, is that some people don't have that internal dialogue because of systemic racism. Makes it impossible for them to imagine it could ever happen to them. It's 11:51. It's 11:55. It was Jackie's fault that I was so late for the last break. But I tell you what, I genuinely didn't notice the time. Actually, is the short answer. I was going to say something like I didn't want to interrupt her or something like that, but I genuinely didn't notice the time. So it's all on me, and I hope she rings us again. And a lot of people there. Deeply impressed by her, but just a sort of clarity of the explanations. Cassie's in Croydon. Cassie, what made you pick up the phone?
Hi, James.
Hi.
First of all, I want to say thank you so much for being the ally that all black people need. Whether they know or not, you are a true ally to us. So
thank you, but I'm still shocked to read what I'm reading today, and I shouldn't be, really.
Yeah, and I'm not. And I think there's actually a clear line between Home Office policy and the treatment of police and the treatment of black people or people of colour.
Yes.
I think there's a clear line. Yeah, absolutely. Even though that was sort of like, this historian's done that from sort of like 30 years ago, 40 years ago, etc. My dad, when he was alive, he noticed the change. So when my dad came to this country, he was a very, he was part of the Windrush generation. Everybody will tell you that a first-generation Jamaican, happy-go-lucky, very, very patriotic, love the Queen, this is our Queen. That was my dad, and he came over and he came to work, which the majority of people, or most of them, came over to work because there were jobs available.
Yes.
So that's why my dad came over. He came over to work. He was happy to. He made sure his children all got an education and gave back to the country. He made sure that all of us got jobs working in an industry where we're giving back. It's so sad to know that when I saw him being hit by the police, because I've seen him being hit, being called the N-word by the police. This was years ago. This was like in the 80s. I saw them bashing his car because it wasn't parked in the right place. That time they had normal truncheons, and they were denting his car because his car wasn't parked in the right place. So I've seen terrible things happen to my dad. But don't forget, they were direct. I mean, what were they supposed to do if this has been part of what the plan is? It's part of the plan.
Well, so, it's forward-looking and backward-looking. The findings are clear, and anyone uncomfortable with this conversation, I'm not unduly troubled by your existence, but you need to answer the question of why this report, why would the Home Office not publish this report? And we know what's in the report, and the report shows 30 years of deliberately racist legislation designed to minimise the number of people like your dad coming into this country, to reduce it from 1950 onward.
Okay, the reason they don't want, or this is just my thoughts. Publishing something like that would take a lot of people. It would make a lot of people turn around and look at themselves and actually realise what's going on and become woke.
God forbid. I think you're right, actually. Because it is penny drops, isn't it? It's penny drop moments. You just look at something and think, oh, God, yes, of course. How could you do that if you hadn't done that? And, of course, if that had never happened, then how could Windrush have happened? Oh, my Lord, that's how Windrush happened. And that makes, it's a mirror. It holds up a mirror to an entire country, and this current government doesn't want us looking in that mirror.
No. Absolutely not. So that's the reason why I think it's not been published. It will make people wake up and see what's actually been happening.
The bit I don't get, I'm sorry to talk over you because I'm running out of time, and the bit I don't get is the personal guilt thing. Why people feel that knowing the truth somehow, unless you still own half of Dorset with money that was made originally by your slaver ancestors. But unless you're in that category, why do people take it so personally? Why, when they pull down a statue of a slaver, do people feel that their heritage is being attacked? That's the bit I don't get yet. I will do, but I'm not there yet.
Yeah, well, please get there. You usually do, James.
Well, I do my best, but only with the help of people like you and Jackie, Cassie. That's the bit I don't get. I just imagine what it would be like for my child to say to me, who's that statue of, Dad? And I say, oh, well, that's someone who made a ton of money enslaving people like us, enslaving our ancestors. And then my kid says, why is that statue still up there? And I would turn around and say, well, it shouldn't be, really. But, Rome wasn't built in a day. And yet some people with my background will be like, well, that statue has to stay up there because he opened a school. Imagine that. Imagine if they had a commandant of a concentration camp, a statue of him up in Berlin or something. And they said, why is that still up? He was a commandant of a concentration camp. I'd say, yeah, but he opened a school as well. He was big on concert halls. Old Rudolph, or whatever his name is. Do you see what I mean? It's so bizarre, this thing, the way that people take it all so personally. And it's all linked. It's all deliberate. It's a direct consequence of legislation and population manipulation. So the people with the least, generally, are often the easiest to persuade to go on the attack for fear of losing the tiny bits that they have got to the mythical foreigner. And needless to say, Viz predicted the conversation we had in the last hour about Imperial measures years ago with a strip called Nigel Farage's Need for Speed. It's 12 noon. It is 4 minutes after 12, and you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where the conversation now goes in a slightly unexpected direction. We'll be keeping an eye on that story, and of course, we didn't really do much. Maybe it was a rhetorical question. Why wouldn't the Home Office commission a report that they commissioned them? Why wouldn't they publish a report that they commissioned themselves into the roots of Windrush and the roots of the Windrush scandal? A commission that was designed to allow the 35,000 Home Office staff come to a better understanding of the issue so that they could be better placed to avoid a repeat of anything remotely similar to the Windrush scandal? Why wouldn't they publish their own report? And then when you know what's in it, perhaps the question answers itself. 30 years of racist legislation. It's a weird one. Jackie and Cassie and all the other callers, a lot of their words will resonate with me for a long time because you know how my brain works. I always think there's a Rosetta Stone. I don't know why. I don't know why I'm built like this. I always think there's a sort of skeleton key. And if you could just find it and give it to everybody, you'd unlock these hatreds and these problems and these bigotries forever. I know that's not true, by the way. In my heart of hearts, I know that's too naive. Otherwise, these things wouldn't come around again generation after generation after generation. They speak to something primeval almost. They speak to something visceral, perhaps, that some of us have and some of us don't. But I know enough people who've come from the dark to the light, if you like, to know that it's worth searching for the skeleton keys and searching for the Rosetta Stones. But I mean, why would you be so desperate to believe that the colour of your skin makes you better than somebody else or more British than somebody else? It's the desperation to believe it that I think holds the answer. And that is not, they try and pretend that this is some sort of working class phenomenon. In my experience, the opposite is actually true. The people responsible for perpetuating these vile myths are usually the biggest beneficiaries of inequality and the biggest beneficiaries of bigotry. The people who still have huge fortunes built upon the back of slavery, or the people who are constantly telling you that you're under attack, constantly telling you as someone with my demographic, someone who is straight, white, heterosexual, middle class or whatever it may be, you're under attack, read my columns, listen to my show, watch my TV thing, buy my books, you're under attack. The desire to believe that you're under attack, coupled with the desire to believe that there is a sort of innate hierarchy of humanity and that you're at the top of it. If we could just crack that, we could crack anything. But we'll return to that topic. We'll return to that topic for as long as I have a radio show in various guises. But as I say, the minute you think you got it licked, the minute you think you've got it off pat, the minute you think you understand it, it's the minute you should probably hang up your headphones. 7 minutes after 12 is the time. Right, David Beckham. Jake Daniels, the 17-year-old who recently came out becoming the first UK professional male footballer to do so since Justin Fashanu in 1990, and the Qatari government, the Qatari World Cup. Qatar is the country where the World Cup is going to be held. It is a country where homosexuality is illegal, and fans have already been warned that if they are travelling out for the World Cup, rainbow flags could be confiscated. So the Qatar government's very anti-woke, isn't it? That's good to know. I mean, again, Vladimir Putin, very, very anti-woke. The government of Qatar, very, very anti-woke. The government of the United Kingdom, also very, very anti-woke. So you pick your side, you stick to it. So here's the government of Qatar objecting to rainbow flags. They no doubt would have terrible things to say about a police officer wearing a helmet that was decorated with the colours of the rainbow flag. So if you're in any doubt at all about what side of these stories certain individuals or institutions are on, just have a look at what Vladimir Putin and the government of Qatar are doing, and then compare it to what right-wing journalists in this country are doing, and ask yourself which side you want to be on. The side of Vladimir Putin, the government in Qatar, and right-wing British journalists and politicians, or the other side. Exactly. So you've got warnings that the flags could be confiscated despite previous promises that they wouldn't be. It's also a country where, under Sharia law, men who have sexual relations with other men can be put to death. Other punishments include lifelong imprisonment and floggings. So again, anti-woke. Go Qatar with their anti-woke legislation and their anti-woke laws. David Beckham took to, I think, social media to express his delight at Jake Daniels coming out. He said, "It's a shame that when someone does come out, that it's such a strange thing. I've always felt that way about when someone does come out. It shouldn't be. At the end of the day," he must have said this out loud. This won't be social media. "At the end of the day, there will be a huge amount of gay people in sports, and why should they be any different from anyone else?" Now, for what it's worth, I completely believe him. I think every single syllable of that statement is the truth. It's his truth and it's the truth. I honestly believe that he believes that. He's very comfortable in his own skin, Beckham. I'm not sure he used to be. I first met him when... Sorry, I first met him. It sounds like I hang out with him all the time. I've only met him once, but I spent quite a lot of time with him when Victoria was about 8 months pregnant with Brooklyn. And he was then very nervous, very shy, very much following her lead on various issues. All he'd ever really wanted to do was play football, and he'd become this icon. Then he got sent off in the World Cup for kicking Diego Simeone, and he became public enemy number one. And for reasons that I will share with you if we ever find ourselves sharing 0.568 litres of beer together in a pub, I got the job of beginning the rehabilitation. So I got the first interview with him as the comeback began. And the comeback, I think we can all agree, it turned out pretty well for him, didn't it? If you think he went from having his effigies burnt on bonfire night after being sent off during the World Cup to where David Beckham is now, I'm not claiming full responsibility or 100% ownership of the David Beckham rehabilitation. I'm merely pointing out that the very first step of it, undertaken by his advisors, involved an interview with me for the Daily Express 156 years ago, in which I got a bit of an image, I got a bit of a glimpse of the man. And I really liked him, but he wasn't someone who felt like a typical footballer. He was thoughtful, sensitive, probably quite thin-skinned, not very strident, none of those things. So when he says that about gay footballers, gay people in general, I just think it's true. He absolutely means it. So now you've got two bits of the story. You've got Jake Daniels coming out as the first male professional footballer to do so since 1990. And now you've got David Beckham applauding his decision to do so and questioning why it is still such a big deal. And now you've got factor three. Well, no, then you've got factor three, which is Qatar, a country which still executes or can execute people for men for having sexual relations with other men, and has on the statute book lifelong imprisonment and floggings for the same quotes offence, end quotes. Right? What's the fourth corner of this square? The fourth corner of this square is that David Beckham is reputed to have been paid £10 million by the Qatari government to be the face of the World Cup this winter. It's coming up this winter. So those are the 4 points of this story. The regime, as you know, has been condemned around the world for its draconian laws on homosexuality and its restrictive attitude to women's rights. We'll concentrate in the first part on the first bit of that, the draconian laws on homosexuality. So Attitude magazine, which is a gay magazine, or rather a magazine for gay people. I don't know if you can have a gay magazine, can you? I mean, how would that work? They've come after Beckham on this. They've condemned him. And I don't know if it's fair. And again, not unlike the last hour, because I'm not gay and I'm not black. My opinion doesn't matter as much as the opinion of people who are gay. I don't think it does on this one. So let me be clear. I'll be watching the World Cup. I find the laws, I find the whole Sharia law attitude to homosexuality utterly repellent. I find it utterly repugnant, nowhere near repellent enough not to watch the football. I think of that fella. It was the same fella who said the stupid thing about food banks, wasn't it? Who said he was boycotting the Euros because the England team were taking the knee to protest against racism. What's his name? Lee Anderson. Crikey, someone get him in the jungle quick. Seriously, he'd be an absolute shoo-in, wouldn't he, for I'm a Celebrity? I don't imagine a circumstance in which I wouldn't watch the World Cup. I watched the Winter Olympics when they were in Russia. We now know that the Russian laboratory had a special pee pipe that was built so that they could pipe in clean urine to do completely bogus tests on their doped up athletes. But I still watched it. What would be gained from me not watching? Do you see what I mean? But would I take 10 million quid? Well, 10 million quid. If I was as rich as David Beckham, this is the question, isn't it? Because 10 million quid to you and me is a very different figure to what 10 million... Well, 10 million quid to me might be a different figure to what it is to you, but 10 million quid to you and me is a lot different from what 10 million quid is to David Beckham. So, who's right on that? I mean, Beckham hasn't actually said anything about it, although his associates claim that the former Manchester United star is satisfied that changes have been made in the Gulf state. Yeah. A spokesman for the magazine said Qatar is an extremely homophobic country where, under Sharia law, men who have sexual relations with other men can be put to death. So he's accused, I suppose, of hypocrisy or of keeping his money just about as far as possible from where his mouth is. So I imagine Sheila, and I stayed clear of this because Sheila is a daughter of Liverpool, so I sense she'd want to get stuck into the story about what happened in Paris on Saturday night even more than I do. So stay away from that for the time being. Sheila will be with you at 1:00. This is a conversation about a million different things. It's not about football. It's not about homosexuality. It's not about Qatar. It's not about Jake Daniels. It's about all of those things at the same time and lots of other things as well. And I have to get the question right. Is it fair to condemn David Beckham for this? 0345 6060 973. I don't know. I genuinely don't know. But I don't think it is. And yet, how can you take 10 million quid from a regime that can put homosexuals to death while also sincerely stating your full support for gay people in all walks of life, particularly in sport, and questioning why they should ever be treated any differently from anyone else? I completely believe him on the Jake Daniels angle. I just don't know whether it's fair to... I mean, what would you rather? That he stayed silent about Jake Daniels and kept the money? Or that he said what he already has said about Jake? I don't know. Why am I talking... All right, I'm 52% confident that this is unfair. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. What do you think? And in many ways, if he is complicit in the oppressive, murderous regime by being the face of the World Cup, then are we not all a tiny bit complicit when we watch it? I mean, is Gareth Southgate not a tiny bit complicit for taking a team to Qatar? Is every country that competes in the World Cup not in some way either looking the other way or even tacitly endorsing a regime as despicable as this one? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. That's the question. Is it fair to give David Beckham a hard time? Is it fair to condemn David Beckham for simultaneously speaking out in support of Jake Daniels, the first male footballer to come out since 1990, and take millions of pounds from Qatar, a country that can put homosexual men to death, in return for being the face of the looming World Cup? 18 minutes after 12 is the time. Hit the numbers now. You will get through. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. 12:21 is the time, and I think we might have time for a Woke Watch before close of play today, or before Sheila time today. Well, certainly I'm going to find time to do this. I just want to say thank you to Kevin and everyone at the Abbey Court housing complex in Edinburgh. Kevin sends me the most lovely cards, keeping me up to date with what's going on, and I've never remembered to say thank you to him on air. So thank you for that, Kevin. And it recalls a time when the whole complex was in lockdown, which was a very strange experience, but we did all the correct stuff. I remember a nurse asking me when I got a COVID jab, what I was looking forward to doing when things got back to normal, and my answer was hugs. You and me both, Kevin. You and me both. First time I hugged my mum when I was allowed to. Goodness me, that was a moment I shall never forget. But thanks for all the cards, Kevin, and indeed my love to you and everybody at the Abbey Court housing complex in Edinburgh. 12:22 is the time. David Beckham, 10 million quid from the government of Qatar for being the face of the World Cup, which kicks off in November. In Qatar, homosexuality is illegal under Sharia law. You can be put to death for having sexual relations with another man. And he has come out very sincerely in full support of Jake Daniels, the Blackpool midfielder who recently became the first male professional footballer to come out since 1990. Is it fair of Attitude magazine to to go after him, to condemn him. Beckham asks why gay people in sport, this is the editorial, should be any different to anyone else. One reason that David might consider is that in many places around the world, queer people are not only marginalised and oppressed, but also persecuted. One such place is Qatar, a country that he is about to become the face of. Neil's in Kendal. Neil, what made you pick up the phone?
Oh, you're right. Hi, James. I haven't spoken to you about 10 years, actually. But,
as long as you're listening.
Yeah, I've been following all the while in the meantime. But, I got invited out to Saudi recently. I'm a rock climber. I suppose reasonably well known within climbing circles, which is obviously extremely modest compared to football. But
yes. Are there any countries where rock climbing is a bigger deal than football?
France, Japan, virtually.
France?
No, not France. That's a very big. It's taught in the national curriculum.
Is it really?
Yeah.
So I mean, are you like a massive star in Japan?
Yeah. I wouldn't go that far.
Are you big in Japan, Neil? That's what I'm asking.
Am I big in Japan? Well, I'm actually not, no, because it's indoor competition climbing is very big in Japan.
All right.
Outdoor rock climbing, not quite. Anyway, we could go off on a tangent massively.
Let's do that another day. I'm quite interested.
Let's bring it back in. So anyway, I got invited to go out to Saudi by the sort of newly formed Saudi Climbing Federation. It's the country's opening up, and immediately posed the question: should I accept this invitation? This was to go and climb with some of the local Saudi climbers and just generally give them a bit of coaching, point them in the right direction, and But it immediately got me thinking. I've got a reasonable sized Instagram following. Again, I mean, it's nothing
Neil Gresham,
like David Beckham, but.
Is it Neil Gresham?
Yeah, it is Neil
Gresham. I've already got one.
Yeah.
Ben's just said Neil Gresham, legend. There you go. Superstar.
Well, if Ben approves, then there you go. Who cares about Tokyo or France? All right.
So did you go? You went to Saudi?
Well, I went. And of course, immediately, I got some choppy treatment on my Instagram.
Sure.
Neil Gresham. Do you not realise, their appalling record against women's rights and homosexuality? As if I hadn't already thought about that. I mean, I like to think I'm reasonably aware of these sort of things. I listen to your show; it's my main point, my main learning point. But there you go. But anyway,
Did you think? I mean, what have you got now? You've got Saudi, haven't you, owning Newcastle essentially, and all sorts. I mean, it seems a little unfair to pick on you when huge sporting institutions and governments who sell them guns and weapons, but you can't go and climb a few rocks.
Right, this is the deal. This was the deal. I mean, I didn't know how it was all going to be when I got out there, but I was absolutely blown away by the reception I received from the local people. The climbers, first and foremost, who I went to visit, but also people who I would chat to in cafes and wherever else. They said that this is precisely what needs in order for change to happen. They need to see role models from Western society who can stand up and say, we do things a different way. And it's like, of course, change isn't going to happen overnight. Change isn't going to happen in a decade. But precisely by interacting with people such as myself, and in the case of football, with having someone like David Beckham stick his name on it, it starts that process of sort of questioning values and saying, is there another way? I mean, especially someone like David Beckham, who until this point has been very popular in the sort of homosexual world. It's like he's been a bit of a role model in that community, and all the climbers I met with were appalled and ashamed of their government's regulations, and said it's a source of national shame to us, and that's why we're just so grateful that you've looked past that and you've given us a chance, and we want things to change, and you coming out here it's green shoots for us, and that was what I found. And
that's
I mean,
really interesting.
You're going to there's always this is just a basic conversation about whether boycotting works or not, and in some cases, of course, boycotting is the right approach, but I can only report from my stance that I am so glad I went to Saudi, and I can assure you it wasn't for 10 million, but it was for
but it was still a worthwhile trip for you. I mean, they made it worth your while.
Yeah, they stuck a few grand in my back pocket, but it was the same at my sort of modest level. It was exactly the same type of dilemma. So I can only say
that's really interesting.
I say to David, good on you.
What if when you got there they'd said, I wish you hadn't come? Because I imagine if you're halfway up a mountain, then you can have, even in Saudi, you can have a conversation without the secret police being able to listen in. So you wait until you're halfway up or halfway down. And they'd said, look, you're really not helping. It would have been great if no foreign climbers had come here, because then the family or the government would have had to explain why. I don't know.
Yeah, no, well, you're right, and who knows what might have happened. But what was so interesting is the fact that I mean, the one thing that I did stipulate before going out was that there was going to be some women climbing in my group.
Yeah.
And there were some women, but what was interesting was when I went to get photos for social media posts, they very politely sort of said to me, look, we're so happy to be here, but obviously we're bucking the trend.
Right.
And, please could you not post pictures of us on social media? And so obviously I didn't. But then, of course, the main backlash that I experienced when I put these photos on my Instagram, which showed me and a bunch of blokes, was like, this is shameful, this is
Where were the
disgraceful, there's
women?
no women in that. And they were all there.
Oh, you can't win, can you?
You can't win.
Ryan's happy, though. He says, I'm far more interested in what the legend Neil Gresham has to say than any footballer. That's from Ryan in Dulwich. I love that, mate. And that is, I think, at first I wasn't sure it was as pertinent or as relevant as you suggested, but it was in many ways exactly the same dilemma. And having David Beckham up there, bigger sums of money, bigger profile, all of that. But will it, to the people of Qatar, send a message that wouldn't have been sent by someone who stayed silent about Jake Daniels, who hadn't worked over the years?
Nothing changes.
Nothing changes unless you let the light in. And we're talking about baby steps, like you doing the climbing with the women, but them not being ready to be on your socials. That's baby steps.
Exactly.
I like your analysis. I like your analysis, not just because it gives me a little bit more confidence of my conviction that this isn't fair for Beckham, but also because it's more nuanced than I'd managed to be. It's letting the perfect be the enemy of the good, isn't it? So Neil, however brilliant a climber he may be and however much a legend he may be, is unlikely to have been able to effect any meaningful regime change in Saudi Arabia by deciding to not go climbing there. If David Beckham hadn't done this, they'd have got someone else to do it, probably. But he has also spoken out in support of Jake Daniels and indeed in support of all gay people. So I don't know. Maybe I'm trying too hard. I don't hold a particular candle for David Beckham, but I think he's largely a force for good. Maybe I'm trying too hard to sort of reverse engineer that. Mark in Aberdeen puts it, again, very, very intelligently, just like Neil. Beckham has made an error here. He takes a different view, but he justifies it with thoughtfulness. I'll be gentle with my criticism, as he's done a huge amount for the LGBT community over the years. My real anger is with FIFA. The World Cup should never have been granted to such a homophobic country in the first place. I don't know that we could argue with the second bit, but it's not going to stop us watching. So do we then become, in a way, complicit in whatever crime it is that David Beckham is being accused of by Attitude magazine? 12:30 is the time. Got a couple of phone lines free. 0345 606 0973 is the number you need. Amelia Cox is here now with your headlines. 12:34 is the time. Beckham is a hypocrite over gay footballer. That's the headline. David Beckham has been accused of hypocrisy for supporting a gay footballer while still accepting millions of pounds to be the face of the World Cup in Qatar, where homosexuality is illegal. Go on then, footballification. Pick a side. 0345 606 0973. Is there a third side here? Is there a middle way? Yeah, he's being a bit of a hypocrite, but I still think it is more defensible than any other call. I don't know. Why don't I stop talking and hear what you have to say? That's how these things are supposed to work. Ian is in South Woodford. Ian, what do you reckon?
I think, as you just tried to put it in another way, it's a conundrum.
Wrapped up in an enigma.
Yeah, because the way I look at it is, and bear with me for a second when I say this.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You've got, in the same scenario, if I was him, I'd say, yes, give me your money, and I'm going to give it, the 10 million, to a charity promoting gay rights.
Well, maybe not all of it.
Well, yeah, I would just do it. Listen, he can do that. But the other side of the coin, at the present time, you've got this terrible situation in Ukraine.
Yes.
Wimbledon have made a thing on it. They won't allow the Russian players, or Belarus as well, into Wimbledon.
That's true.
Now, ATP, the governing body, have said that the tournament in Wimbledon, I think, they will not get any points because of if they win anything in Wimbledon, because of the banning of the players.
Well, the players won't win ATP Tour points to decide who comes out top at the end of the season.
Yes.
I didn't know that. Okay, and that's relevant.
I just want to check, but I feel that is right, because there was a whole thing with the top American player. She said, I can't be bothered to maybe go to Wimbledon because I'm not going to win anything.
Yeah. That seems unlikely to me, because she'd win Wimbledon.
That's right. She'd win Wimbledon, but because it's the points, she doesn't get the points, and she wants the points. It's.
No, all right, we're getting a bit distracted. Steer me back to Qatar. What's that got to do with the price of eggs in Qatar?
I didn't know they did them. I thought it was the oil. But it's with Qatar, yes, I would say it is wrong, because you can be sure that out of the players that are going there are going to be a percentage that possibly are gay.
But they're going to go anyway. So who's more culpable,
right.
them or David Beckham? If you're a gay player playing football in a country where you could be put to death for being gay, who's the bigger hypocrite, the player or the pundit?
No, the pundit. I don't take him as a pundit. I just think he's doing
promoter.
a job.
He's a promoter.
Correct. He's a promoter. So basically, if he feels that what they're doing is wrong, say, yes, I'm doing that, but then put all the money into promoting.
That's a bit of a cop-out. I mean, you know how this programme works. You're not really allowed to pick your own sort of option on. You should have taken the money but given it all to a charity. It wouldn't change the fact that he's still the face of the tournament, would it? The face of the country.
Well, that's right, but it'd be slapping the country in the face. Yeah. Right? That's saying, yes, you want me to be the face, but I'm saying what you're doing is wrong.
I mean, it's a thought. It is, as I say, it's a kind of. I suppose I was looking for a third way where he is a hypocrite, but that's allowed. I don't know that it's a comprehensive solution to the problem, in the sense that he would still be taking a look. Maybe it is. Maybe you've solved it. Well, let's get David Beckham on the line, and we'll make this suggestion to him. How much would he have to give in order to diffuse the accusation of hypocrisy? I don't know if he is being a hypocrite, though, and Ian's pretty confident that he is. I'd take you back to the first caller from the rock climbing legend that made the point that actually having David Beckham associated with it for the people of Qatar may just be a sort of little letting the light in exercise. 12:38 is the time. I promised you that we'd do one of these today, and I just have to make sure that I've got the one in front of me that I want to do, and I do. So now we can, I'm delighted to say, quite a serious one, but it's time for Woke Watch. This is a Republican senator in America speaking in the aftermath of the latest massacre to take place in a school, the one in Uvalde in Texas that left, as you know, 19 children and 2 teachers dead. We stopped teaching values in so many of our schools, said Ron Johnson in an interview with Fox Business on Thursday. Now we're teaching wokeness. We're indoctrinating our children with things like CRT, telling some children they're not equal to others and they're the cause of other people's problems. This is a conversation about the shootings in Texas. The presenter, to his credit, for someone who works for Fox, pushed back, noting that these shootings were going on long before. CRT, by the way, is shorthand for critical race theory, which is something racists complain about without being able to tell you what it is. We're going on long before CRT and wokeness, right? But Ron Johnson would not concede the point. I think critical race theory has been going on under the radar for quite some time as well. Wokeness has been. Liberal indoctrination has been. This is a much larger issue than what a simple new gun law is it's not gonna solve it. It's not gonna solve it. So there you have it. The idea that wokeness and critical race theory are somehow responsible for the massacre of 19 school children and 2 school teachers in Uvalde in Texas last week. A statement, an observation made with absolutely no evidential support, but as I've explained to you on many occasions, the whole point of being anti-woke is to avoid the need for evidential support for your prejudices and bigotry. So you simply say, that's woke, when something terrible happens. I didn't think that you'd get an illustration of that point quite as gross and as clear as this one, but there it is. Senator Ron Johnson, claiming that wokeness somehow played a role in the latest school massacre in Texas. So putting his name alongside the government of Qatar, Vladimir Putin, and half of the British media in being anti-woke, although I wonder how many of them would stoop as low as he has. Woke Watch. I have got another one, but I've got quite a lot of Beckham calls to get through as well. Let's see how it plays out. Michael's in Kensington. Back to David Beckham, Michael. What would you like to say?
You know, how can I go to David Beckham when you get my blood pressure up with Ron Johnson and Fox News? But I'm going to try to go.
It's supposed to be. This should be a safe space, shouldn't it? Really, this should be a safe.
Really, but anyway, let's not talk about Ron and CRT. Because,
no, let's not.
But anyway,
carry on.
I am of the school. I am a gay man. I am very centrist. I think you should take the money, donate a huge amount of it, make a big stink about the fact that he's giving it to, LGBTQ organizations. If there are any that actually work to push human rights in the Middle East, he should give it to them. And, Qatar isn't going to change if David Beckham takes it or doesn't take it. So we might as well take their money and do something good with it.
I'm going to close down the charity option now. I'm
glad I got in.
No, you did. Because it's a little bit of a cop-out in a way, because the question is he being a hypocrite, regardless of what he does with the money, because it's his money then to do with what he pleases. So he could spend it all on scratch cards, or he could give some of it to Stonewall or another human rights organisation. That is still allowing him the agency of deciding what to do with the money. I'm interested not in what he does with it, but in whether or not he takes it. Is he a hypocrite to take the money while also publicly offering up sincere support for Jake Daniels?
So I say because Qatar, in my opinion, is beyond the ability to change for gay rights in 2022 right now.
Yes.
If this were a UK-centric issue, I would say he's a total hypocrite.
Right.
But because it is going on there, it's like, dude, is that the thing you're gonna fall on the sword for that now in Qatar? I mean, women who are 50% of the population or more still are second-class citizens. They're going to worry about the gay guy. It's like, I say take the money and do good with it.
I like that. I can see that. How about this? There are degrees of complicity in the Qatari regime, right? And the World Cup. And David Beckham's complicity by dint of taking 10 million quid while sincerely supporting Jake Daniels and opposing homophobia is quite high. So on a scale of 1 to 10, let's call it 10, because he's taken 10 million quid. Are we not all complicit if we watch it? Because we're all contributing to the revenues being raised from which...
Thank you. There is always going to be someone who can look at you and go, what are you doing? You're not doing enough. What about you? So until we are all in the pious glass house of, that are untouchable, I think everybody needs to do what they can do. Enjoy the sport. I'm not a football fan. I couldn't care less.
What?
But enjoy.
Get off my show this minute. How dare you come here with that filth?
I know. I hate to be a stereotype, but I'm the gay guy that was last picked for the football team.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. That's not fair.
Oh, no, I showed them now. I'm super fit, so it's okay.
And that is perfect enemy of good. I mean, all right, you can condemn David Beckham, but you're not allowed to watch the football. Does this retrospectively cast Lee Anderson as less of an idiot than he constantly insists on portraying himself in public? Should everybody who had a problem with the England footballers protesting against racism have refused to watch the football on the grounds that they hate protests against racism? I don't know. I doubt it, but I don't know. It's 12:45. 12:49 is the time. Obviously, as a Kidderminster Harriers fan, I haven't faced many moral dilemma in the way that perhaps Newcastle fans have, with Saudi Arabia essentially being their new owners, and I guess Chelsea fans should have felt with regard to their last owner being a pal of Putin's, although that was never quite as properly reported as perhaps it should have been until after Putin invaded Ukraine. The closest I came as a Kidderminster Harriers fan was when they had a UKIP advert at Agborough, the home of football, Kidderminster Harriers home ground, and it did put me slightly off my pie at half time. Quite a prominent UKIP advert, and at the time, if you want to bring it back to homophobia, you had there was a councillor in the party, wasn't there, who claimed that let me get the facts right on this one. There was a UKIP councillor who claimed that the floods, would it be 2014? The big floods, the last big round of floods, and he claimed that they were a punishment from God for bringing in gay marriage, same-sex marriage legislation. My brain, the way it works, I'm pretty sure his name was Sylvester. His surname was Sylvester. I could be wrong. I apologise if I've libelled everybody in the country called Sylvester. I think UKIP got banned from a gay pride march after, various comments made by people like that Sylvester chap, I suppose. Various members accused of homophobia. So this would be the closest I came to having it. Would I stop watching Kidderminster Harriers play football because they had taken money from UKIP in return for putting up a big poster at Agbra. It never really crossed my mind not to carry on watching. Obviously, the television issue is not really relevant to following Kiddie, but, you know, it might have been. That's the nearest I've come. Most of us are not going to deny ourselves the pleasure of enjoying football because of the questionable provenance of some of the money involved or some of the people involved in owning the clubs and things like that. But we probably should. So how complicit are the rest of us? How complicit are the rest of us in the homophobic regime in Qatar getting, if you like, a little bit of a whitewash, thanks to A, the World Cup being there, and B, David Beckham taking 10 million quid off them to be a face of it. But the big question I'm asking is, how big a hypocrite is David Beckham? I don't think he deserves all of the criticism that he's getting. Rob's in Cargreen in Cornwall. Rob, what made you pick up the phone?
Hello, good afternoon, James.
Hey, Rob.
Speak to you. I was when I was listening to you, I was thinking of your analogy earlier about the statues and the child speaking to the parent, and the parent trying to explain, and then it becomes apparent and you can't justify the statue. I was thinking of a similar one in terms of David Beckham and a family, gay parents with children, watching the World Cup. The child says to the parent,
"Yeah,
my understanding was David was in support of our lifestyle, of your lifestyle, and didn't have. How would the parent be able to justify, David Beckham's face being there?
Yeah,
because it will be there constantly, won't it?
Yeah, I mean, this is where the phrase "poster boy" is very helpful, isn't it? He is a poster boy for the World Cup in that country, therefore. He's a poster boy for that country. Have to try to justify that, don't you? He has to say why he's doing it. And you were saying before very kindly, it could be a small step towards, raising an awareness. But so far we haven't heard that, have we? And okay, we've got to give the benefit. Well, oddly, we have heard it, but it doesn't mean it's true. In that his associates told, I think, the Mail on Sunday yesterday that he is satisfied that changes have been made in the Gulf state, but that is kind of a little bit hollow, isn't it? It does seem that way, and I don't want to be overly judgmental. No, nor do I. I want to hear the man's views, out loud. But it does seem, like you say, a little hollow at this point in time, and his face will be there, won't it? It'll be. You imagine it'll be very prominent in. I mean, he's arguably still the most recognisable footballer in the world. Well, you've got Ronaldo and Messi as well, but they're still playing, aren't they? Certainly probably the most recognisable retired footballer in the world. Undoubtedly. And he does. Does he apportion some legitimacy to the regime by being so closely associated? He just does, doesn't he? There's no getting away from it. I don't think you can get away from it, unfortunately. No, and from the way you described your interaction with him, it just sounds genuinely. Oh, that was that was a very long time ago, and I should probably not even have brought it up. I just on the grounds of me completely believing what he said. I don't think he said it for clicks and virtue. I think he absolutely categorically means every single syllable of what he said. And that does sit uncomfortably with his trousering a 10 million quid to essentially be the face of a homophobic regime or a deeply draconian regime, specifically with regard to homosexuality. So why do people find it so hard to come out? Ask David Beckham. Answer, because there are loads of homophobes in the world, like the fella you just took 10 million quid off, mate. And that then becomes problematic. But what should he have done instead? I don't know. Ahmed is in Milton Keynes. Ahmed, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. First-time caller. Just agree with pretty much what you said. I think we're using David Beckham as a scapegoat. Really? I don't think I said that. No. As in, everything that you said, I don't think that he should be used as a scapegoat. I think there's other sporting events that happen around, for example, Formula One in Saudi. You've got Formula One in Abu Dhabi. These are all countries as well where human rights are. Yes, but 10 wrongs don't make a right, do they? No, of course not. So we can criticise Formula One drivers if they are publicly supportive of the LGBTQ community, and then they go and race in Saudi Arabia, or they go and race in countries where you can get put to death for being gay. They stand accused of the same offence as David Beckham. We're just talking about him today. Yeah, correct. So, in that case, just you alluded to it, Lewis Hampton openly came out, had the rainbow on his helmet,
I don't think he came out, did he, Lewis Hamilton?
No, as in came out with the stripes on his helmet.
I've missed some stories over the years, Ahmed, but I didn't think I would have missed that one.
No, you've taken when I said came out. I don't mean came in.
No, I know. I genuinely thought you did. I looked at Sheila and thought, did I miss that? I didn't miss that one. No,
I think the whole world might have missed that.
I think you're right.
I think David Beckham is a prominent figure in the football world. He attracts a lot of people to these sporting events. So in terms of marketing a sporting event, I don't think it's wrong. Yes, what those countries are doing with human rights and LGBTQ violations, I agree with that. But I think we need to keep the two separate sporting events from political issues, because there's a lot of sporting events around the world which now are starting to use political problems as a forefront to promote that, and I think that's wrong. We need to keep sport and politics.
It's not a political platform, is it, though? It's not keeping sport. No, gay rights isn't really. It's human rights, mate. Gay rights are human rights. They're not political. Well, unless you're talking about human rights being political, in which case you don't think human rights has any role in sport.
No, but you're bringing David Beckham into a political issue about Qatar and what they've done and the regime. So
just gay rights, just human rights issues. I do think sport has to acknowledge human rights. Otherwise, we'd be conducting. Well, I mean, how much worse could it get, actually, Ahmed, thinking about it? I was about to say, otherwise we'd be hosting every major tournament in countries that are among the worst human rights abusers in the world. But we already are.
Correct.
So I don't know if we're ever. How do we ever slam the brakes on then, if not for people to take leadership roles like David Beckham and to actually say no? I don't know how you ever put the brakes on. It is incredible thinking about it, and I hadn't thought about it properly until you rang in. But I was about to say, as a figure of speech, well, then we'd end up hosting all the biggest sporting events in the world in the countries with the worst human rights records. But we already are. So can't Beckham? I mean, if it's not going to be Beckham who makes a stand, who is? I don't think Ahmed realised I was still talking to him when I said that. If it's not people like Beckham that are going to make a stand, who is going to make a stand, mate?
Exactly. But, I mean, we're using Beckham's...
It's a little bit unfair to stick this on him, but someone's going to have to do it at some point. And if Beckham's got the stones to come forward and say what he has said with utter sincerity about Jake Daniels and about the gay sportsmen and gay people in general and sportswomen, then he should be the one to actually pick up the leadership baton and say, do you know what? They've offered me 10 million quid, but in all conscience, I can't take it while they're still putting people to death for engaging in homosexual acts. Listen, I don't think we're disagreeing with each other much. I just probably have a little bit more optimism when it comes to the idea of somebody somewhere taking a stand than I might otherwise have. But there it is. That's the thing I'm taking away from that. I was literally about to say, well then, I mean, where would that end? We'd end up having all the major sporting events on the planet in the countries with the worst human rights records. And I suddenly realised before I said it out loud that we already are in that place. And I'll leave you with that happy thought as the time approaches 12:59 and Sheila Fogarty is limbering up for her programme. 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 Limbering up for